with chronic disease, you must take into account the underlying root mechanisms that are giving rise to your specific condition. In other words, you don't have acid reflux, you don't have diverticulitis, you don't have IBS or whatever disease your mainstream medical doctor has labeled and tagged you with. What you have is a specific type of IBS, acid reflux, diverticulitis, Crohn's disease. In other words, we need to take into account, and you need a medical approach and a medical system that also renders this other information valid and usable, so that you're not getting treated based on your disease condition, you're getting treated based on the specific signs and symptoms that make up your individual type of that disease diagnosis. I'm Christian Nix, also known as the Barefoot Doctor. The title of this video is Why You Cannot Heal from a Chronic Condition Using Disease Diagnosis. Let me explain. With disease diagnosis, everybody gets the same treatment. In other words, if you get a disease diagnosis of something like IBS or acid reflux or anything in between, you are now categorized as having a specific disease, and the protocol for treating you is the same as the protocol, and the drugs will be the same by and large, with very little variation, as everybody else with that disease diagnosis. Now, if the problem with this approach to treating based on disease diagnosis isn't clear to you, let me just illustrate why it's so hard to recover from a chronic condition when you're treating it based on a disease diagnosis. Let me ask you a question. What about age? What about body type? What about all the different physical characteristics, including gender, that go into the prognosis and also the potential disease mechanisms, and I'll explain what I mean by disease mechanisms in a moment, that underlie your chronic condition? In other words, like, doesn't it matter if you're 18 and you have acid reflux versus you're 78? Isn't there a big difference between somebody at age 18 and 78? Isn't there a difference between the way men and women get sick? Like, aren't women physically a little bit different than men, for example? Doesn't that factor in to your underlying condition? And therefore, shouldn't it also be taken into consideration when you try to design a treatment plan and a treatment protocol for a specific condition? I'm being facetious here because the answer to those questions is obviously yes. Those other characteristics really matter, and not just the obvious ones like age. A person who's 400 pounds and grotesquely morbidly obese and overweight obviously has a different set of disease mechanisms and disease causes that are going on and that will complicate both the condition itself, but any attempt to recover from that condition, obviously, is going to be very different from somebody who's 175 pounds and fit, and maybe one person has tremendous fatigue and whole body pain and aches and lots of signs and symptoms of dampness, and another person has symptoms of dryness and doesn't sleep very well and is kind of high-strung and on edge and maybe suffers with anxiety. Like, aren't those two people radically different in terms of their root cause of their disease, the root disease mechanisms that are at work in those two people? So if we can agree that they are radically different, why would those two people get the same treatment? Why would both of those people, if they were both suffering from acid reflux, be given the same medication to treat the disease of acid reflux? That's what I mean by treatment based on disease diagnosis. It doesn't work because it can't work. And the reason that it can't work, if it's not obvious before watching this video, hopefully it's clear to you now that with chronic disease, you must take into account the underlying root mechanisms that are giving rise to your specific condition. In other words, you don't have acid reflux, you don't have diverticulitis, you don't have IBS or whatever disease your mainstream medical doctor has labeled and tagged you with. What you have is a specific type of IBS, acid reflux, diverticulitis, Crohn's disease. In other words, we need to take into account.
If you enjoy this channel and benefit from learning about ancient medicine and how it can help people with modern chronic conditions like yours, then you'll love my new book, The Patient Empowerment and Self-Care Manifesto. There's 112 pages of simple, easy-to-understand wisdom from ancient medicine with its elegant system of pattern diagnosis for helping regular people understand the exact root causes of hundreds of chronic conditions, the exact chronic conditions modern medicine cannot help you with. You'll also discover what steps you need to take to reclaim your sovereignty over your health and your recovery. In it, I delve deep into the 4 areas that affect your body's ability to recover from a chronic condition: diet, targeted exercises, state of mind practices, and simple remedies and treatments anyone can use, and which specific steps you need to take in what order if you want to activate and control your body's own self-healing resources. I promise you, this book is unlike anything you've ever seen or read before in the fad diet, biohacking, fad fitness, fad health and wellness, fad everything new age industries. Once you read Patient Empowerment and Self-Care, you'll never think about your health or chronic illness the same ever again. You can get a free copy of my Patient Empowerment and Self-Care Manifesto and ask me questions directly twice a month on my Ask Me Anything coaching calls when you take a trial membership to my private community, the Nix Institute for Self-Healing and Integration. The link is in the description.
And you need a medical approach and a medical system that also renders this other information valid and usable, so that you're not getting treated based on your disease condition, you're getting treated based on the specific signs and symptoms that make up your individual type of that disease diagnosis. You can ignore that strange noise. It's called a huacaracha bird. I'm here in Colombia. Little side note and distraction for you as I'm on location in Medellin. My point here is primarily there are 4 ways that the body goes out of balance, and the ancient medical system that I discovered, that I teach you about in all of my material, the Pivot Protocol and the Nix Institute for Self-Healing and Integration, both of which you can find linked below in the description. In all of my material, I am teaching you how to recognize and identify your specific chronic functional symptoms. Functional symptoms are not like laboratory signs and symptoms. They are not based on laboratory analysis or imaging in an MRI or an X-ray or computer tomography scan or any other high-tech kind of exam or laboratory blood work analysis of what's happening inside your blood that mainstream medicine would recognize as being a valid diagnostic tool. However, these the functional signs and symptoms of chronic illness turn out to be much, much more valid and valuable to your personal journey of recovery. Why? Because you have control over these. If you know what the functional signs and symptoms of a chronic condition are, learning how to deal with those and then remedy them by controlling your internal environment, allowing your body to do what it was designed to do, which is recover on its own. If you can manage your internal environment and you recognize what the symptoms are of specific organ imbalances, which is what I teach you in all of my material. I did a video recently talking about the 4 primary imbalances. It doesn't matter what your disease is. The body can only go out of balance in so many directions. Primarily, if you set this like a compass with 4 primary directions, those primary directions in terms of chronic illness conditions are heat, which always implies heat in the liver. All heat in the body is related to heat in the liver. There is no heat condition that doesn't involve heat in the liver. There's no such thing as having heat that, and here we're talking about pathological heat, heat that is causing a disease, heat that is pushing you out of balance because it's too excessive. You have an excess of heat, you have a repletion in the body, meaning that the body is excessively working itself into a heightened state of usually metabolic heat, which is why we trace it back to the liver. All chronic illness has this capacity, and in real life, I guess theoretically there is a chronic condition somewhere where a patient doesn't have excess heat, but in real life patients, you just don't see it. It's a textbook kind of thing. A patient with a real life chronic condition will have excess heat. And so the liver is always implicated in these chronic long-term functional imbalances, and you can recognize the signs and symptoms of heat in the liver. Opposite of heat, then on the other end of that compass rose, right? Heat, cold. Here, cold doesn't refer to the body being cold in temperature. It doesn't mean that you're subnormal in temperature, where if you put a thermometer under your tongue, you would realize, oh my goodness, this person is below 98.6 or 37 point whatever that is, 2 in centigrade. It doesn't mean that your body is cold like you're shivering because you were out in the snow. It means that the body is hypofunctional. It means that certain of your organs, and I teach you which ones tend to go out of balance in the opposite direction, developing hypofunction, are tired. They're exhausted. Well, this makes total sense. If you've developed a chronic illness, something in your body isn't capable of keeping up with the load that you're putting on it. So part of your organs, part of the complex of organs that have to work together to keep you well are working too hard, and part of your organ complex is working not hard enough. Why? Not because it doesn't want to, but because it can't keep up, right? You have too much burden on your organs and you overwhelm certain organs and they cannot keep up. This primarily relates to the spleen and intestines, but there's some nuance there that I go into and explain elsewhere. When your spleen is cold, when you have a cold condition, what it actually means is that you're tired, you're fatigued. And the reason you're fatigued is because this primary organ cannot do its job, which is central to the digestive function. You could have too much dryness. Well, if you're dry, it's not hard to figure out that you're dry. You're thirsty, your eyes are dry, maybe burning, your skin is dry, your hair is dry, your nails are dry, but primarily in chronic illness, what we care about is that you can develop dryness in your intestines. When your intestines are dry, you can't eliminate regularly. You have trouble with elimination and your stool gets stuck because it comes out in little balls. Your intestines are so dry, you can't move your bowels normally. Obviously, you're headed for disease if you can't eliminate waste out of your intestines on a regular basis. So dryness is an easy one to target. And the opposite of dryness is too much fluid building up in the body. This primarily manifests as mucus, but not just mucus. Adipose tissue or fat tissue is also a form of dampness, and a very common one, obviously, in patients with chronic illness or chronic conditions. And so too much mucus, too much dampness building up in the body will also be a primary cause of chronic conditions. Everybody with chronic conditions has one or more, actually, in real life, you have more than one of these primary imbalances. Heat and dryness go together, right? Because in nature, heat causes dryness. A cold condition in the spleen goes together with dampness. If your spleen is tired and fatigued and overwhelmed and worn out and overburdened and can't keep up with the workload that you're putting on it, you will develop dampness. This is a very, very common cause and complication of chronic illness. And here's the real reason that I'm telling you all of this. If you can recognize these 4 primary imbalances and you know and have discovered, which is what I'm sharing with you, the system that makes it obvious for you to just go down a checklist. I mean, when I say recognize these symptoms, it's really no harder than, can you go down a checklist and say yes, no? Like, do you have difficulty swallowing? Do you wake up between 1 and 3 a.m.? Do you have red eyes? Do you get irritable easily, right? For women, do you have breast distension and painful breast and PMS and dysmenorrhea? Do you have any of those things? If you do, your liver is working too hard. Your liver is overheating. Are you fatigued? Do you get dizzy standing up? Do you crave sweets? Right? Do you have teeth marks around the edge of your tongue? If you said yes to any of those things, your spleen is exhausted. Your spleen is overwhelmed and weak. You have a cold condition in your spleen. Do you, when you move your bowels, have your stools come out in little balls? If so, your intestines are dry. Do you have mucus in the back of your throat? If so, you have dampness. A very, very simple kind of checklist that I start people out with. You can find a link to a quiz that I've put together. I can identify your primary imbalance with one single question. Now, it doesn't mean, as I said before, that you're going to have only one imbalance. You will have multiple imbalances. That is the nature of chronic illness. Nobody with a chronic condition has one thing. If you had one thing out of balance, your body would have already fixed it and you wouldn't be sick on a day-by-day basis. Chronic illness always implies that multiple things have gone out of balance at the same time. When you have multiple things out of balance at the same time, it is possible and even likely, and if you're watching this video, this is absolutely what's happening to you, that you get locked in to a kind of negative feedback loop where one thing happens over here which causes a problem in this organ, which causes a problem in this organ, which causes a problem back here, and round it goes, right? Where heat in the liver causes problems in the spleen gets weak, you get develop dampness goes in the intestines, dampness in the intestines causes more heat, the liver overheats more, your spleen is even more burdened, and the heat builds up to the point where you end up with dryness and you can't move your bowels. Now you're locked into, you're sort of stuck in a chronic condition where it's self-reinforcing. It reinforces itself so that you can't break out of it. The good news is, with a little bit of training, it's not hard to break that negative feedback loop. It's not hard to break the cycle of chronic illness, but you need to know how to recognize these things. And then, and this is the point of today's video, you need to understand a second layer, which are called the disease mechanisms. The reason that disease diagnosis doesn't cut it when it comes to healing and recovering from a chronic condition is because healing a chronic condition requires you to change your treatment as your symptom changes. Let me say that again. The reason a disease diagnosis doesn't work is because when you're diagnosed and treated based on disease, you're expected to do the same treatment over and over, even though that's not what is happening. Your chronic condition will be changing. If you recover a little bit, your condition is no longer heat with dampness and a cold spleen. Now your condition has shifted to some other pattern of imbalance. If you take the same treatment that helped you when you had this condition over here, and then try to apply that same solution after your condition has shifted over here, it won't work. It can't work. The treatment that worked for this pattern of imbalance is not designed to treat, nor intended, nor will it have the same important impact and positive consequences on your condition once it has shifted to another set of signs and symptoms. So the advantage of the ancient medical system that I discovered is this is a medical system that anybody can learn. I've taught it to, if you're over age 12, you can learn this. I've written the material at about a 7th grade level. I've taught this to children as young as 12. So if you can read and watch a few videos and go through a checklist and then learn about the disease mechanisms specific to your condition, because we're not treating a disease, we're treating your pattern of that disease at this moment. You sit down and eat a meal that you designed based on the signs and symptoms of your specific type of reflux today at this hour. And then, over the course of usually a few days, as your condition improves, you find that it doesn't go away overnight. It's not that I was sick, then I healed my chronic condition and it's all gone. No, it shifts. Your symptoms improve in one area so that your primary complaint is something different. When your primary complaint changes, what has happened is the disease mechanism underlying your root problem is now different than what it just was. So you started off with a treatment for this root disease mechanism. I've already given you the primary ones: heat, cold, damp, dry. And now your condition has changed to where your primary underlying root imbalance disease mechanism is just a fancy medical term. Actually, the fancy medical term is referred to as pathophysiology. That means a patho just means disease-causing mechanism. The physiology of your disease has changed. If the disease mechanism changes, you must treat it according to a different protocol. You have to have different solutions for this imbalance than for this imbalance. It makes total sense. And when people see this, the most common comment that I hear from patients and coaching clients and people that I help understand this ancient approach that is so effective, where mainstream medical approaches are so ineffective for chronic illness recovery, is, oh my goodness, you're the first guy who really understands what's happening with me. And I humbly submit that no, it's not that I understand what's happening with you. It's just very, very easy to figure out once you apply the correct medical system. And the correct medical system for recovering from chronic illness is the ancient medical system that I've discovered and made available to you in my material. So as I say, lucky for you, I've put all this material together in one place. What you need to recover from a chronic condition is a basic working understanding of the disease mechanisms that underlie about 95% of all chronic conditions. The good news about chronic illness is there's just not that many imbalances to go around. Most people fall into about a category of, let's say, 10 basic patterns of imbalance. And ancient medicine has looked at these patterns for roughly on 24 centuries, being very, very careful with really high-level debate to really sweat the details. So instead of basing your treatment on a disease diagnosis, you can apply the specific remedies, treatments, diet, non-dietary techniques like targeted exercise, and the state of mind practices, which can have a big impact on a lot of chronic illness for certain patients, that pertain to your condition. And then when your condition begins to change and your condition begins to improve and your symptoms start to shift around, where this was the worst part of my condition, say difficulty swallowing with a sore throat in the case of acid reflux, now my fatigue is actually the worst part. My throat's okay and I can swallow fine, but damn, am I tired all the time. Okay, well that's a different disease mechanism. Let's treat that as your primary disease mechanism, and that way the body is always getting exactly what it needs at the moment that it needs it, and you're targeting the exact thing that you most need to focus on right now, today, at this hour, at this meal, with this workout, right? For this 12 or 6 or 12 or 24-hour period, this is my pattern. I know exactly how to address that pattern. The good news with all of this is the solutions are not only fun, because you really do realize, wow, I have a lot of control over my condition. The really good news is not only are the solutions fun when you treat chronic illness this way, and tremendously empowering, since you don't have to really involve a doctor. Once you learn this, you kind of have it for life, but also you don't have to get it 100% right. This is not like a sniper shot at 1,000 yards. You just got to get your organs kind of working together a little bit, maybe 10%, 20%. If you stop doing certain things and then you target a few of your primary imbalances for a few meals, for a few days, and maybe do some targeted exercise that help with your exact imbalances, you find that your body knows how to heal and do the heavy work of healing on its own. That's a big, big relief. It's actually a big weight off people's minds when they realize, no, I not only know what to do for my condition, I don't even have to be that great of an expert because the body does the heavy lifting for you. Your body is designed to heal on its own. Your job is to make sure that you control your internal environment in such a way that your body can do what it's already designed to do. Fortunately, I can help you with this task, and it's an enormous amount of fun learning how to heal yourself from a chronic condition. So I hope you'll check out my Nix Institute for self-healing and integration. This is everything, all the good stuff that I learned boiled down into one place. It involves a 110-page book that I put together for you, my patient empowerment and self-care, and a membership site that will walk you through and show you demonstration videos of all the wild things that I learned during my almost 2 decades in the forest of Central America, where I met my mentor and studied natural healing in a way probably not one other person alive today has done. I also put together a special program for digestive illness, since digestion is the root of so many chronic conditions. It's called the Pivot Protocol. You can find information on that, including a fast start guide, 5 tips to help you feel better by tomorrow. That link is in the description along with all the others. Thanks very much, and remember, your body knows how to heal on its own. Thanks, I'll be back with more great stuff.